start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for coming. We have all our trustees here. So we have a really cold and quorum for the meeting. So thank you for coming. We will start with do some oaths. Trustee Delaney. Amada. Just a side note, I think those swearing in recitations are getting longer and longer. It's a little hard to remember what this. Oh. You want to read that, John? Adding some volunteers to the department, right?
Yes, sir.
Want to get a little background, a little.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Tyler Friedman and Jonathan Haddon are the two new members. Tyler was a fire explorer for Delray Beach Fire Company in Florida for 2 years to get a head start in his fire service. He moved to New York to become a licensed New York State EMT. He believes that serving the men and women of this village would be a great honor to him. One of his greatest accomplishments of his career, young career that is being a member of the volunteer fire department. Jonathan Haddon was a previous member of the department for 15 years, between the years of 98 and 13, before resigning when he moved out of town. For a short time, he was a member of the East Meadow Fire Department before deciding to come back to Garden City. He was a 3-year captain of engine company.
And with that, Mr. Mayor, I ask that the board approve both applicants to be volunteer firemen here in Garden City.
Mr. Macrinos, Trustee Macrinos makes that motion. Mr. Delaney makes that motion. Mr. Macrinos seconds it. All those in favor? Thank you very much.
Thanks. Thank you for your
Are they both here? Oh, okay.
John Haddon.
John, congratulations.
Are you letting him in the room?
Thank you for serving.
So thank you very much. Appreciate it. We really do. We've been having a lot of success with our fire department the last few months. So we're in a good place. Hey, Chief? Okay, thank you. Okay, this part of the meeting, we usually have our department heads and village administrator walk through items on the agenda, so we can talk about them, hopefully inform people as to why we're taking certain actions, especially the larger items. So if we could do that.
So Mayor, Board, and public, thank you. There's a number of agenda items this evening, and each of the department heads are prepared to go into the details on the specifics. But there's three things I'd like to call the board's attention. The first is item number 8, the acceptance of the donation of the NYU Winter Electronic Scoreboard. As you know, the Winter Pop will be donating money here for 3 years. I just want to let the board know that the artwork for the board was received by Winthrop and was sent back for greater detail, imaging, and returned. And I have a copy of it on the computer if you want to tell it later on with the presentation, but that part of the process on the way, so I'll point that out to you. The other thing is that this evening also there is item number 18, Compel Landscaping. While Mr. Oka has other things to update the board on in relation to the Parks and Recs, I want to just remind the board that back in 2016, we had 2 employees at Trite, and their benefits and salary totaled about $189,000. And at that time, we awarded a contract to Compel for $178,000 with a renewal. That was covering 90 acres of open space in the village, and it freed up our manpower to attend to other things the Parks and Rec needed for. So this is the second year. We put it out for bid again last year with the option for 2-year renewal. This is the second year on that. But during this time, first of all, the contract is split into 2 fiscal years. We have the April and May portion, which is going to be awarded tonight, and then for the 1920 budget, we're asking for the remainder for the next 6 months. That carries us from June to November, the growing season. I also want to point out that this has been a very successful contract. I even see the owner out there when we have days after rainy days out there catching up. But during this time period, the original 2 people have been followed by 4 other electricians. So Parks and Recs have given up 6 full-time bodies, which is the equivalent of over $500,000. So this contract is definitely well worth it, and the redeployed manpower is helpful in other areas of the village.
Ralph, if you wouldn't mind, can you give us, give the public an idea of the areas that these people maintain?
Oh, by the way, the acreage on the site, the acreage went from 90 acres to 110 acres. So basically, the village has, I'm not sure the total number, 120 acres of open space. That includes the strips of land along Clinton, little parcels where Franklin and Meadow and 2nd Street are. So we had to mobilize people to get on a truck with their equipment, go to these little pieces of property, cut it, get on again, drive to another quarter acre, have all these spaces around the village that we call open space, not specifically parkland, which is a different aspect of the recreation department. So we concentrated into the Compel contract, and it saw up to 90 acres. We gave additional acres, including Village Hall here. So when we redid it, while it's a little more costly per acre, it's still a bargain. They do a very nice job. Our men work hard, but this was a great, efficient way of stretching taxpayer dollars with no adverse effect to the workforce. It's a natural attrition.
I would just ask that, can we put in language in the contract that they pick up trash as they're cleaning up an area? Is that possible?
It's in there.
Oh, it's in there. Okay.
That's enforceable.
Okay, great, thank you.
And the third item is that on number, let me just get the number here, I'm sorry. We have an architectural firm here this evening at the invitation of the Fire Commissioner, the Chief, number 16. Fire 16B, TCAD Architects and Design. They are here tonight. I invited them in case the board had any specific questions, and they've also prepared a PowerPoint presentation that's on the computer, so they can bring us through a quick slide presentation of their work and talk about what they would do to look at the Edgemere Fire Station, which out of the 3 fire stations is which is the one that needs the most attention.
There's a correction on item B, it should be 21.5.
Oh, okay, so then there's a correction.
Item 16B, not A, but only B, the amount should be $21,500. Correct.
Thank you, Chief. And that's all that the department's.
Why don't we do that before we actually vote? We'll have a, to hear.
Yes.
And you have a,
Yes, sir.
You want to go down and stand up and introduce yourselves?
no, why don't we do it before we, let's run through the rest of it.
Okay, I'll run through it, and then it'll be for the vote.
Right, yeah.
Okay, what else on the agenda?
I would ask Ms. Wu to go through the finance items. Let's go over to the order of the agenda each department.
Good evening. Under the finance department, the major categories, there's the number 2, the professional services proposals. So we have our actuarial firm, Sound Actuarial, and they do annual required actuarial analysis for the village. They do work regarding the village's workers' compensation and general liability insurance. Working closely with our insurance broker to understand what the village's liabilities are so that we can properly establish our liabilities at the close of the fiscal year end as well as budget for the upcoming fiscal year. And they also do what's required for the village, the OPEB, other post-employment benefits analysis and work for the year-end audit as well. There's a request of a transfer of funds from the finance department, regular salary to the consultant line to continue funding the temporary accountant until those positions are filled. We recently received the civil service list and we're in the process of interviewing. There were about 39 individuals who were eligible that scored in the top 3 scores. So letters were sent out to them. We received about 19 responses, and we interviewed along with Mr. Swazi, who attended some of those interviews as well. We sat down and interviewed about 7 individuals. We made 1 offer, which was accepted, and we're considering the second offer. We made a second offer, and they're considering the position as well. So we might be filling. 1 person accepted, and we made a second offer, so hopefully, we'll have in the next month or so, have some of these positions filled. So we're very relieved and happy about that.
When does the first person start?
In the first week in February. Yes.
Thank you.
And the second transfer of funds is to fund some of the startup costs for the Winthrop ambulance service for their location, some of the upgrades that needed to be done in the room for electrical and key fobs and such. So some of those costs are being transferred to the recreation maintenance account. And there was also a tax settlement from the Garden City Hotel, so we are settling that based on our council's analysis at $52,500 for the tax years 2013-14 through 2018-19.
Any questions for Ms. Wu on agenda items? Anyone? No? Good, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and Board. I have a number of items on the agenda this evening. A lot of them are ministerial in nature. We're renewing some rates. Item number 22, Atlantic Wells, they service the pumps in our well sites. Item number 23 is the engagement in professional services for Tyler Technologies. This was an item that the board approved last budget year. This is for a comprehensive IT system for the Department of Public Works. This is happening in conjunction with the building department, and this will be a complete, for Public Works, it'll be a new system. For the building department, I believe, to transfer to a new system. But we both feel, Giuseppe and I feel, that this is will be a significant improvement for our departments, making us more, bringing us into the 21st century with eliminating paperwork, making us more user-friendly, customer-friendly, enable us to have better reporting and more accurate data at our fingertips in order to help us run our departments. Items number 24.
Giuseppe, do you want to jump in on that topic, Giuseppe? Or?
I mean, it's basically, said everything, it's going digital, and that's what we lean towards, going for the future digital. We had all the scanning projects, go through, and now we're gonna get this new program to implement everything else entirely together.
Departments just communicate with each other.
Our departments are able to communicate with each other, so building applications and public works permit applications will be in sync with each other. This system will also tie into other existing systems that we have in the village now. For example, the GIS system will be able to link to this system. The GPS tracking system will be able to link into the system. So it's a very versatile system that allows us to expand as the village, as we grow. So we're very happy about this.
Excuse me, as long as we're talking about technology in the building department, do we have an update on where we are in the digitization process?
Yes, we do have an update as far as the phase 2, which will be completed by the end of February, and we'll pick up phase 3, which is basically implementing all the property cards and all the rest of the documents that we have in the building department. So basically phase 2 will complete the scanning of most of the permit process, and then we're going to start phase 3 by March. Beginning in the middle of March, we'll start phase 3. Hopefully be done with phase 3 within 3 to 4 months after that.
And then once we're done with that, then it's all done?
The bulk of it will be done. We'll still have a continuation of until we really physically go live with Tyler. There's still going to be a time frame which we're going to overlap with the digital scanning with the program.
And when is the estimated live date? When do you think? September?
So hopefully before the end of the year.
Okay, before the end of the year. Okay, thank you.
What are you going to do with the abacuses and the homing pigeons that you use to send messages to each other?
Garden City Museum, Science Society. Items 24 and 25 are apropos for this weekend as weather forecast. We are renewing our contract with Pratt Brothers to supplement our snowplow removal services. We use them when we have major storms and our resources are stretched. They assist us in some of the bigger, larger parking lots in the village. I believe we used them twice last year. And item number 25, renewing our agreement to use the 555 Stewart Avenue location to dump our excess snow when we need to clear out areas. This will probably be the last year we have this area available to us.
Joe, do we have plans on what we're going to do next year then?
We are looking at areas down at the DPW yard, possibly paving some areas down there, because like for example, the mulch field is a very large area, but it's all dirt, which is not conducive to dumping snow. So we're looking at either paving areas down there, or we have other alternatives in some of the larger parking lots, for example, the Y parking lot, or some like 9E, for example, where we can move snow into the back if we have to. But we are looking at options down at the yard.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Mr. B?
Joe, could you just explain 3B, the 25,000, same thing? Just elaborate a little more on it.
Sure. So when we engaged with Winthrop Ambulance Service for the village, they needed a location in the village to have a headquarters. So we gave them a room. We allowed them to use a room in Cluett Hall. So we did some work on that room. We added some electrical outlets for them in order for them to be able to operate their radios. We needed to make the building accessible 24 hours a day. So key fobs were needed to install on the entrance doors to the building and also into their offices. In addition, the ambulances require to be constantly have electrical charges to, they run on diesel engines. The diesel engines need to stay warm in order to be able to respond quickly. They also keep medicine inside the vehicles, so the heaters inside the vehicles need to be on all the time. So we had electrical run outside, so the ambulances are able to stay connected whenever they're parked there. In addition, we did some work, static work for them. We made dedicated parking spaces for them, along with no parking signs, and we're also going to be improving the lighting in the area to make sure that it's well lit and they can operate safely.
Thank you.
And one other point to note is that that location is added on to the priority list for emergency services. So with along the police department and fire departments, that location will get plowed early.
That's correct. They're moved to the top of the list, that section, yes.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, I'd also like to thank Kevin Oker for helping us out with Cluett Hall, because he was instrumental in securing that space. So I just want to publicly thank him for that. And I can also give a little update that the ambulance service is doing well. We're in the second week now, and I think everything is running pretty smoothly. Communication with them is good through the police department, and they're being dispatched well. So thank you, Commissioner, for that. And so far, so good.
Mark, have you got any idea how many runs they've had so far?
The first week, I think they had about 40 plus runs. I think about 38 of them were transports. So I don't know as of today what it was, but that was as of Monday.
6 a day. 6 calls a day, fine. 6 or 7.
6 or 7 a day.
Mr. Mayor, with respect to item 10, which is the rental of voting machines from the Nassau County Board of Elections, the backup papers recite that the agreement is between the Board of Elections and a special improvement district. They just sent the wrong form. It's the identical form, but substituting the word village rather than special improvement district. So the form of the contract is satisfactory, but we just have to substitute the other format for a village instead of the one they gave us for a special improvement district. Also, with respect to item 14, it's an amendment to our no smoking policy, which is essentially a policy required by state law that there can be no smoking in public buildings, and the no smoking prohibition includes vaping, and just for purposes of clarification for the board, vaping also includes, under the public health law, is defined to include the use of electronic cigarettes. So electronic cigarettes are included within the definition of vaping, which is now included within the no smoking policy. Someone will someday have to explain to me exactly what vaping is and what the attraction is, but it's prohibited.
You'll find out.
I'm sorry? Marijuana next, okay, question mark, all right. But with those two clarifications.
And I believe, if you could, first, I think on number 12, if that's incorrectly described, it should be an addition of Garden City Life.
With respect to the agenda item, it should be to add the Garden City Life as an officially designated newspaper for the publication of legal notices at this time, with the intention to change over completely effective with the organizational meeting in April, so that there will be a 2-month transitional period during which legal notices are published in both papers, and then the changeover will occur in April, as I understand the resolution.
Thank you. Can you do the, should we go through the 2 hearing dates now?
We can do that, sir. The, if you do want to open the public hearings? Okay, then do you want me to do the explanation of them now, or at the time the hearing is over?
Thank you. Okay, is there any other items on the agenda that anyone on the board needs further explanation, or anyone on staff wants to add for?
I'm sorry, Mayor, I'm reminded we're only setting dates for public hearings.
Right.
So, with respect to the setting of a date for a proposed local law to authorize the village to adopt the property tax levy in excess of the limit established in the general municipal law, this local law does not raise taxes and does not direct the board to raise taxes. It is merely a protective local law proposed to allow the board to raise taxes above 2% if and only if the board determined that it was appropriate to do so at the time of enacting the budget. Under current state law, the 2% state limit would prevent the board from addressing a budget circumstance that required a tax limit above the 2% mark unless this local law is first enacted. So I'm therefore recommending the local law merely as a protective measure, one which I know the board will hopefully not want to take advantage of unless it is determined it were absolutely necessary at the time of budget adoption. The second item on the agenda for hearings is to set a date for a proposed local law to amend the village code in relation to street openings. And this local law amends our existing code, which already requires a 150% deposit to cover the cost of a person restoring a street damaged by a street opening. The amendment prohibits, short of an emergency, that permits being issued for street openings for streets that were repaved in the last 3 years or newly paved within the last 5 years. The amendment also clarifies that when a permit is issued, the length of roadway that must be restored or repaved is the entire width of the roadway spanning the length of the roadway being disturbed by the road opening. An exception is made for street openings done to install gas lines in residential properties, and there are also some technical clarifications in definitions, for example, changing Director of Public Works to Superintendent of Public Works.
And it also obviously doesn't apply to emergencies and things.
Exactly, emergencies are exempted.
So I don't know if people had seen in Newsday, several of us saw it, and that was the impetus for this local law. I think it was the town of North Hempstead who enacted something like this. So we thought we would give it a shot, see what happens. Peter?
Can this law be applied retroactively to roads he's just done, or it's only going forward?
I would generally prefer to give legal advice privately if we could hold that for an executive session.
Thanks.
Chief Gallo, could you just run through number 17, which is the S funds, what we're doing with it?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. So, as the board is aware, the HES estate was set up for the services of our heavy rescue truck for years. And basically, from that amount, we would purchase a truck, which we've done, and moving forward, the remainder of the money we use to purchase equipment specifically for that truck. The main function of that truck is our heavy rescue equipment and our extrication equipment. That's the equipment we use at calls to extricate people from cars, buildings. It contains airbags and what's called rescue jacks, which stabilize cars and buildings if necessary while they're working. So over the years, we update that system, different parts, update tools. The tools run on electric power from the truck itself. They also run on what's called portable generators, and they also run on battery power. So we have a wide variety of options to work on different areas at calls. So we're updating some of that equipment. We're going to institute a new battery-powered item, which allows us to, if we have a car, go into an area where we might be difficult to get cabling in and our gas generator, because obviously a gas generator can fall and spill gasoline. We can get in there with a battery-powered unit if our cables from the truck can't reach. So these money transfers to allow us to upgrade the equipment and purchase new equipment.
Great. And we've been all volunteer for how long now?
Since the beginning of September.
Things are going well?
Things are very, very well, sir.
I haven't heard any complaints.
It's going very well.
Thank you. Thank you and the team. Thank you.
Well, Mayor, we did have one complaint. One of our citizens was concerned that we had sent too much equipment to a house fire. Yeah, exactly, exactly, Colin.
Too good of a response, that's good. Okay, anybody else have any questions on agenda items from the board? Or staff need to comment on anything else?
Just one other thing I just wanted to ask the chief, before we have the presentation. Again, as of September, we went to the all volunteer. And as we are sitting here looking at Fire Station 2, which is by far the station that needs the most work, because of the changes that we made, I believe that the additional work that we were going to consider having to do with the other two stations, which amount to millions of dollars, will not have to be done now. Am I correct in that assumption?
Yes, sir. I sat down and we did a new 5-year plan. The past 5-year plan took into account doing all 3 places and extensive work on all 3 through the advice of Cameron Engineering. We sat down and reevaluated now that we are a full volunteer department, and now we've come out with the options of that we need to address Station 2 as a primary. There are minor issues with headquarters and Station 3 that we need to deal with in the future, but are not directly as it was in the past. So the prices are going to be changing, the cost of that.
Thank you very much.
So I also want to, Kevin, you have some projects going up there?
Well, non-agenda.
Oh, not agenda.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Okay, anything, I guess we're now moving towards non-agenda, any questions or issues trustees want to raise or staff generally? I guess I'd like to hear, I'm sure all of us, where we are with the water tower. And also, okay.
Thank you, Mayor. The water tower, for those of you who have been driving recently on Oak Country Road, you'll see that there have been plates in the road in front of the tower. We are doing some valve work in preparation for demolition of the tank. Next week, we're doing a series of tests. We'll be shutting the tank down for a day in order to do some of this work, and this will be a test run for floating off of the West Hempstead tank. It's a pretty significant test. We've established radio communications with West Hempstead. We're going to be opening interconnects between our villages, and this is again in preparation for demolition. The site's been cleared, it's ready, and we've scheduled a start date of, depending on when the valve replacement work is complete, of either February 4th or the week of February 4th or the week of February 11th as the start date for demolition.
Is it my understanding that they are adding a second tower, West Hempstead?
West Hempstead is adding a new tower. They have the luxury of space, so they were able to build their new tower before removing the old tower.
And it's the other style we thought
It's
about.
the original style that we considered, a concrete pillar with a steel wall on top, yes. I actually visited the site and saw the construction.
Thank you. Kevin? Non-agenda?
Yeah, I have several non-agenda kind of updates on some projects we have going. The St. Paul's Comfort Station project had been awarded. We executed the contract. Construction is going to begin on Tuesday, on the 22nd. So that project will wrap up the end of February, early March. Pool filter room improvements is underway at this time. Roberto is on that project. They will be completed by the end of March with that work. The other part of the pool improvement is the bathhouse improvements. That's the new roof gutter system, trench drain replacement, handicap ramp in the adult area. That is also going to begin construction on Tuesday. So we're anticipating that to begin. Again, end of March, contractor appears to be very good, wants to get in and out as quickly as possible. We completed the tree planting, annual tree planting throughout the village. We planted 171 trees. We had removed also 63 trees are being removed now under another contract, and almost 500 will be pruned by contractual service. Field 2 is well under construction at Community Park. You'll recall that will end up being a synthetic turf infield, natural turf outfield. They've been working almost 2 weeks there. The dugouts are gone. Fencing is down, so they're well on their way. to deliver us that field before opening day of baseball. We mentioned the scoreboards. They are being fabricated, and the contractor is submitting a schedule to do concrete and steel. As Mr. Swazi reported, the graphics were submitted so that the manufacturer has those as well. And in-house work actually connected to the strategic plan, Grove and Hemlock restroom buildings in those parks. Our staff are renovating those bathrooms, similar to the way they did Edgemere, and that is underway at this time. Thank you.
I think we should talk about the tennis bubble heating problem.
Joe?
Yes, as you're aware, we are in the process of replacing the heating system in the tennis bubble. The old system that we removed did not function up to standard, and we made the decision to replace it with a new system. We've had some delays and setbacks with the current project. The new system is installed, but there's more work to be done to get it to be working properly. So the project has been slightly delayed, and we've had to make the decision to cancel some court times over the next week in order to make sure the project was done correctly and we can get the new heating system up and running properly.
What are we thinking it's going to be now?
We're hoping by the end of next week it will be complete.
Is it going to be closed for a whole week?
We are planning to have it closed for the week. We're hoping to have it done before that and be able to open prior to that, but we are planning for the worst case scenario of it being closed until the end of next week, yes.
A couple of aspects to the heating system. One is the heat itself, and the second is the circulation of the heat downward to the floor area. If the heat element itself satisfactorily heats the bubble, they could return to a night installation of the fans, but that remains to be seen until I get the heating at the high level they need right now. It's at a low level. So it's operating at there's two levels, low and high. They need some wiring to be put in place and programming to get to the high level.
And the weather's not cooperating. It's supposed to be in single digits next week, so that's not helping.
We have notice on the website.
We don't require one.
Okay.
Mayor, before we go to the presentation, I just want to make mention that Mr. Oker went through 9 or 10 items that he's working on with his team, and I thought it would be appropriate tonight to also, as I was advised by Mr. Oker, he'll be leaving at the end of this fiscal year. I've advised the board, and we'll be looking for a successor. But Kevin has been overseeing a renaissance in the parks area, as we have been doing with all the DPW areas and the streets and everything else, and has brought new life into the parks and recreation area. And although there will be more to be said later, and I can't speak for Mr. Oker, I think he's put us in a very nice place as he transitions out. So I want to thank him publicly for his service tonight, and working with him through the transition through the end of May as well.
Thank you. Yes, I'm sure on behalf of the board and residents, we thank him for his many years of service, so thank you very much. Anything else that people need to speak about?
One thing, I just kind of received an update for the ambulance service. It was 45 runs in the first week. And Justin, that's Monday? Yeah. Up to Monday? 45 runs in the first week.
Anything else non-agenda that people want to raise or ask questions about? Okay, before we go to citizens' comments, I think some of the Winthrop guys are here, right? So, could you guys stand up? Thank you for the donation. Again, it's $140,000 total, right?
That's right.
The scoreboards are about 160? About 160,000. So they were nice enough to make a donation to the village. We're going to allow them to have their name on the scoreboards, of course. But again, thank you guys very much. And come up and thank trustee Heyer, who kind of really took charge of the whole project, so, and Commissioner and Chief Gallen.
Mayor, I will say that this probably wouldn't have happened the way it did if it wasn't for Justice Guard helping us through the whole transition, so I want to say thank you as well.
Yeah.
Small, so don't you worry about that.
We get the whole board, because you all. Team effort. Thank you. Thanks again.
Okay, now we'll entertain questions from anyone.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, well, we're gonna have the architects give a little presentation on things we're thinking about for the Edgemere building and how they might approach it. And we do hope to have soon a new projection scheme.
Mr. Mayor, we have interviewed a number of companies and we have walked through the boardroom a few times, and we are entertaining proposals for a new AV system. Actually, I started in the schools, and that's where I got my recommendations from. I did pull it.
It did over here, yeah.
Wait till it stops completely.
We'll be gentle with it.
Go slow.
Ready? Yes.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor, ladies and gentlemen of the board, commissioners and directors, we appreciate the time to the public to talk a little bit about this proposal for this feasibility study to the station. A little bit about our firm. We're local here, South Shore, Long Island, in Bay Shore. Currently working with the New Hyde Fire Department, kind of working through the same exact scenario of determining the feasibility of design, repair, modernization, etc. We've been very active on the South Shore of Long Island, helping our neighbors. We carry most of the design work coming out of the Sandy Recovery through the Governor's Office of Storm Recovery. We've been involved in several church renovations, namely the first, and we'll talk about this here tonight, the First Presbyterian Church of Babylon and their 1839 historic renovation of their fellowship hall. So we've been a nice mix of light commercial, historic, sort of voluminous residential over the years. And so when we were approached and through our questioning and back and forth, we focused in on really the mission and purpose of looking at the renovation, modernization of the firehouse, really to meet 2 points. One, that it meets modern standards, and not just for equipment and apparatus, but for personnel. And again, my understanding is that we've moved from a staff position to volunteer, and we have several additional bodies utilizing this space. And so we need to make sure that modern apparatus, equipment, and staffing needs are met, but in the same thought process, we need to ensure that the community requirements and that we preserve the existing aesthetics of the building, so that we maintain that look of Stewart Avenue and that it is in continuity. And so in our practice, we utilize an objective, evidence-based design process. And simply what that means is we are going to go through the process of collecting the data in a very sophisticated means, laying that all out, being able to make sure that the square peg fits into the square hole, and it's our job to report back to the stewards of this village all of the information so that decision-making is easy. So, and we will come to the point of saying that we're going to have 3 possible outcomes after we collect the evidence and we lay it before the board. One is that we modernize the existing fire department. We were privy to a very detailed report done by an engineering firm that looked at some of the mitigating measures necessary to just maintain the property. I know there are facade issues, there's mechanical issues, there's multiple issues with the building in its current state. So we're going to look to see if, as we collect data, can we make sure that the apparatus, equipment, staffing needs, the drilling, and everything else that happens inside the fire department, can we use the existing footprint? The second thing we may find is that the footprint does not work, but we may be able to add additional square footage as needed. And be able to look at that to see, can we blend the old and the new? A third outcome may be that this existing fire department, even though we may try to maintain the existing footprint or maybe add on to it, it just either from a logistical standpoint of construction doesn't make sense, from a financial standpoint doesn't make sense, right? And so what our process of coming through here is keeping in mind the requirements of both the professionals working as well as the community requirements, be able to take that through and be able to look at this objectively, take the data and put it through a process where we can come and say, at the end of this feasibility study, well, which path will we go down? And in our practice, we deploy, again, we're always looking at the evidence, we're always looking at finding the data and how do we deploy this in a way that what we've found over the years is that lay people, and even contractors, sometimes have a very difficult time visualizing what something will look like. And so in our process and our means and methods of doing this, we'll deploy some, I don't want to say cutting edge tools, but the tools that really will define architecture really as time progresses. And so the days of using tape measures and laser tapes kind of is leaving us behind. And so we laser scan the existing structure, and this is really the gold standard in the architect, engineer, construction industry. And the building itself with the turret and the tower and its unique appeal, to be able to preserve this, this is the way to do it, is to be able to capture this accurately. So whichever path that we take, whether it's modernize, and build new, or build new, we will ensure everyone that we have an exact representation that will meet the needs because we've documented this properly. And what that does is it gives us a point cloud. And this point cloud then allows us to, as designers, whether we're off-site or on-site, we can then basically take the firehouse and don goggles and be able to view the exact representation of the existing space without any questions, and we can walk the space while being off-site. It also allows us to translate the existing conditions to the fine detail to be able to put it into our software so that we know what fits and what doesn't. While we're doing this, we'll document things in a 360-degree manner. And so they're not flat stills, but they allow us to capture this and pan through, be able to look all around, up and down, and then be able to then, the depth of detail that allows and gives us is really unparalleled. And so we then place all of this information into our BIM software. Most firms still operate in CAD. Maybe that's something that's been kicked around in the industry. It's a bit archaic, but in really some of the large vertical construction in the city, where we're avoiding conflict and clashes, etc., this is really the way to proceed with any type of new construction of this magnitude. And then once we take all this information, again, we're able to put it into these goggles and allows you to walk the space before it's ever built. And so we capture accurately, we put it in, we're able to look at it accurately, we're taking photos, we're putting it into a software, and then as we start to churn out the design, we can actually walk the space before it's ever built. And so, we're currently, we're very close right now to our first conceptual design in New Hyde Park. And they have, again, a large apparatus and an outdated building, and this doesn't do it justice, but in our 360 photos, you're actually able to manipulate this so that you can look up, down, north, and south. We had advance warning that you were a little temperamental here with your gentle equipment, so we didn't want to stress the system. But the interesting thing here is, and you see here, well, this is where point cloud will look like. What you can't see is the measurement underneath it. And what you can't do is take a 360 photo and do anything with it. But when we put it into this point cloud, and we had Chief Gallo to the office, you were able to stand in this little gap. And when you put these goggles on, there's a certain dimension of your brain that is not activated unless you are fully enveloped in it. And just like you know that, Mr. Opera, we're probably standing about 4.5 feet apart, probably. That's just intuitive. When you're standing here, you know that you only have about 15 or 16 inches. And you feel like you're standing and stuck between the edge of the apparatus and the garage door. So there's something that happens here, right? So we're going through this process right now with New Hyde Park. And so what do these digital assets do? So as we build this and as we start layering in process and layering in value onto it, nothing is ever thrown away. And so as we laser scan, we memorialize the existing conditions with a very high level of accuracy. Is it doing on that side? It's just not catching up here. Yeah, come over here. Okay. So then what it does is then it captures the as-built conditions and it allows for future facility maintenance. So as this is being built, as this is being pulled apart and data is being collected, it's never wasted. It's the information here, I'll go back here now. The information is used and can be used during pre-construction walkthroughs and bidding, right? Which allows for more accurate estimating by the general contractors. It will help to speed up the construction cycle, and it, most importantly, especially at these early phases, it will give stakeholders and the community very good integration into this decision-making process. And in the end, right, we're always looking to create savings of time and money. And that's what these tools are really designed to do. And we've been putting them through their paces, not in a vacuum, but in real-life application. So here in Babylon, we have the historic 1839 Fellowship Hall in its existing condition, and it's sitting the outbuilding set back. And utilizing these tools, we came up with a finished product that really is, in many ways, very similar. It didn't disrupt Main Street, and yet enhanced the space. So here we have an up-close picture of before, and we have an up-close picture of after. And so you can see all the architectural details, the windows, and it was maintained. Again, dealing with stakeholders, lay people, village officials, non-construction, and again, lay people, to be able to navigate large numbers of people administratively to be able to get to this finalized product. You know, here's a side shot of the unit, of the building, and again after. There we go, good. Now, again, this does not do it justice, but here we have a, if you were able to put the goggles on in our office and sit inside a fellowship hall, this was our depiction. And when you're wearing the goggles, you have the ability to, you know, bend your knees and look underneath the table and walk around the space and be able to feel size and depth, etc. And then here's a built-out space. So there are no surprises. And I would say that also, this is not just a rendering. This is, we go from a scan to a point cloud with 360 photos and support. It puts it into our construction documents, and then the construction documents come alive. And what you're looking at here on the TV screen is a before and after. The VR depiction is actually the construction documents, but just in another, it's a derivative. I mean, that's the best way to put it. And so and as you can see, here's the built-out space, and it's spot on. And so, as the stakeholders were making some minor decisions in terms of TV screens and how big should it be, and where to place memorial plaques, where to place some of the transom windows, decisions were made like this. Non-technical stakeholders would say, "Oh, we donated some money, and I'd like to memorialize my husband, and I don't know what. Oh, I want it right there." An instant decision where that might have taken who knows how long in committee. So what we also did, because this always will come down to dollars and cents, we've poured over some of the research as to what it costs. And so again, we're not sure what we're building. So to say here what this is going to eventually cost is really anyone's guess at this point. However, with that said, we can look at some of our neighboring towns and villages locally, as far as in the region, to say, well, what was spent? So in Dix Hills, they had an $8 million budget to renovate existing and build new. And what they opted was a 10,000 square foot, 4-bay substation that was pre-engineered, meaning partially built off-site and brought on, that they built for $300 a square foot cost. Their existing 1956 headquarters was renovated for $4 million. And then they had site work for about $1 million. Now in Rocky Point, and this is all current, I believe Dix Hills is operational. I believe Rocky Point is still in the middle of their construction process. Now they have a $7.5 million new substation being built, which was pretty close, 11,422 square feet. But they built new and custom at $656. And so I picked these two to show that when we renovate older units versus new construction, here we can see clearly it was $1 million more. But when we're building new, custom, versus pre-engineered, we have a significant cost differential. Now, New York is New York, but what we did was we looked at, and again, that original, after their analysis, original building built in the 50s, they decided to go new. Now, this little chart here is from 2012, Broward County, Florida. They did an extensive research as to what they were spending, what they spent on their four firehouses, some with 4 bays, some with 3 bays, some with 2 bays, and they did a cost comparison. And in that, what they found was that they were, on average, their cost per square foot in 2010 ranged anywhere from approximately $290 to $340 a square foot cost. In Brownwood, Texas, about an hour and a half southwest of Dallas, in 2012, they built that about $200 a square foot for a 15,000 square foot new building. Johnsonville, South Carolina, they're building at about $242 a square foot cost in 2015. Now in Congers, up near the Tappan Zee, which I don't know if anyone saw get blown up a couple days ago. That's not, you don't get to see that too often. They built a 20,000 square foot new facility, and they built at approximately $455 a square foot. So, it's reasonable to say that, this range of $400 to $600 a square foot probably is not unreasonable based upon comparative projects regionally, locally. But again, that really all does remain to be seen, and understand that we're objective in our nature. What is decided here at this particular property, whether it's modernize the existing, add the footprint, or build new, we're here to serve. And we'll do that in a professional manner that I think the experience will be very careful to integrate input from all stakeholders.
What's the size of the building now, roughly, square foot?
I think you were 6 and change, 657 or something along there. Yes, sir.
The challenge that you face is obviously that the building that you're looking at was built many years ago. And the usage that the building was built for, most of those don't exist anymore.
Right.
So the reality of it is the usage of the building you're looking at is something you have to bring into the modern usage.
Of course.
The biggest thing I think that the majority of the residents have expressed to me, because this is my section, is that they care about the character. They care about the look of the building.
Yep.
We don't want a, shall we say, metal structure. Okay. If someone may have mentioned that, I don't know. I won't say from the east who mentioned that, but I think what's most important is that the look of the building, the character of the building, it maintains the way that it is. Because I think that is essential to the people who live there, and they want to be able to look at something that they can be proud of.
Of course.
So that's...
And again, because of the nature of our practice and the tools at our disposal, it just lends itself.
Okay.
It just lends itself to, and again, in the earlier slides, as we capture the data, it's never thrown away. It's not just a waste. It's being used again and again, and at the First Presbyterian Church in Babylon, we've used the 360 photos. We actually were a part of an engineering team that Jacob Javits Center had put an RFQ out for the documentation of the Javits Center, that we were part of one of the bidding teams. And in that RFQ, they wanted to be able to take 360-degree photos and key it to a floor plan, and then be able to annotate that. And so we developed this process and deployed it here at the, in this case, at the First Presbyterian Church of Babylon, where we have an older caretaker who's starting to age out, and he has a lot of information trapped between his ears. And if he decided to leave, all that information is leaving with him. But as we start this process, and whatever path this takes, the tools that we have at our disposal allows us to capture and annotate, and then be able to very simply, and not from a complicated, but a very easy user interface, be able to annotate the simple things, like at the church, where do they keep the key for the vertical platform lift? So for ADA requirements, to be able to get into the sanctuary, we have a change grade of maybe 30 inches. Well, where is that key located? And so annotated on the photo, in the facility management tool, we can just push a simple button, look at the floor plan, be able to say, it's right here in this closet, this key, with a picture, right here. And so we take it and it becomes a process, becomes a system, a reproducible system of providing facility management. And I tell you all this because it starts with maintaining the integrity of the building and being able to make the town proud of this structure, but it's never thrown away. We don't take it and throw it away. We utilize it again and again, and we just leverage the heck out of the tools.
Just one last question, what do you estimate your time frame when you'll be able to come back to us to give us an idea of what we're looking at?
I would probably say we need about 6 weeks, maybe, to capture and to start the process of having something that we can start getting, chewing in, biting into.
2 months. Yeah, Trustee Bulber, let me just say, when the chief and I and Administrator Swazi and DeFrancisco met, we made it abundantly clear that contrary to what I was misquoted and misunderstood, that clearly we want that building, if it can't be preserved and we have to start a new building, it has to look exactly the same. And that's the way their church in Babylon. Right. This photo does not do justice to the way what it looked like before and what it looked like after. But we've made it clear, and they completely understand that we need to have it look exactly the same. We might have to use different materials, but it's going to look exactly the same.
And Mr. Lee, that's a great point, because if we go back to some of the photos, some of the materials used were substituted from modern standards, but no one, you would never know. You would never know. And so, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but you made it, that's a great point. That's a great point.
Any other questions or comments? Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move to citizen comments on agenda items. Just a second.
Nice to see you. Good presentation.
Number 4.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm from the Western Property Owners Association, Jerry Kelly, 135 Stewart Avenue. So very interested to hear the presentation tonight, because I looked out on the Firehouse. So we got to get to know each other, and we will. But I just really want to thank you, Trustee Delaney, for your comments, because that's really, the look of it is going to be as important as the way that it goes. Because it is an integral part of the neighborhood, and I want to compliment the volunteers, because they've been there a lot and doing a lot of work. They decorated the firehouse, and I know there was a tragedy in the last month or so with a fire, and just the compliments I'm getting are just really good. And it's always hard when you get into a place where someone makes a big mistake, I think, and has to bear that consequence. But you guys handled it so well, so we appreciate your work, and just keep it up. And thank you. There were a few agenda items I wanted to speak about very quickly. Number 1 is 18. Mr. Swazi talked about that. And you talked about the institutional knowledge. The institutional knowledge of our Parks and Rec people that were with us a few years ago is great. So when they're going around and doing stuff, they'll do Edgemere Road, they'll do the green grass along the railroad. What I've had to do this year is call Kevin sometimes and say, can you get Con-Cal to do this? Can you get them to do that? And that's institutional knowledge, which somehow, when we out-contract, it doesn't get passed. So I just want to make sure that you know, when you lose someone who has institutional knowledge, it's very now, with Kevin going, that's to me, is my heart breaks, because he has just been, I have to tell you, you have been a wonderful resource for all the people, and I just think it's sad, but we'll get to that later. It's really sad. So 18 was a little bit, 16, I'm glad I was here for this comment. And then there's something on St. Paul's. I'm not going to get into St. Paul's because we'll probably talk about that for another year or so. But the whole point is that we did a survey in the West, and the survey had, we had a lot of 120 responses, and it did say just minor income producing, but more to restore the historic part of it. And the residents were very straightforward as far as don't just make it all about sports, make it for culture. And our comments are online. We have 110 people, so I just want you to know that. And finally, on the Garden City News, certainly I have a lot of comments about that, because when my property was in the newspaper for building design and review recently, we're putting in a wheelchair ramp and all that. My wife's getting ready to ditch me out there. But anyway, the point is, there's communication. And there's such a volume of communication through the Garden City News. I don't want you to take that lightly. There's so much invested in something that's been a part of our lives that would be a shame if you just said that that's going to go to Garden City Life, because then my neighbor wouldn't know that my property, he read it in the paper. And communication is critical. When you have communication and we're on the same page, things are better. When we're not, things get diminished. And if you look at the volume of how many people get the Garden City News versus Garden City Life, Garden City Life is very hard to get an article in. Garden City News is simple. So you're looking at something that is, streamlines the process and makes it so that we can put a Western Property Owners Association meeting in what we're doing, and letting the East know, whatever, that we're doing something new, so they know, but it's all there in the Garden City News. Garden City Life, I don't see it, I don't get it, it's not the same thing. And I just want to throw you one quote from Peggy Noonan, who was the best speechwriter ever. She said, "I should say here, because some in Washington like to dream up ways to control the internet. That we don't need to control free speech. We need to control ourselves." And Peggy Noonan was very great speechwriter for Reagan, not a Democrat, so I wrote about Reagan. But he was really good, and communication is one where you don't detract, don't take away, because then you're going to get into catch-22, and that book doesn't end over there. So please take my comments apart, keep going with the Garden City News as your official newspaper, and I think that's it. Any questions?
Thank you.
Appreciate your time. Thank you for your presentation. Make it look really nice.
Yes, sir.
My name is George Salem. I'd just like to follow up on previous comments about going to city life. And the first question is, why are we doing this? We're shifting from the New York Times to the Daily News, something like that. So from a major paper to a minor paper. Why are we doing this? Do we have an argument, a disagreement, a major disagreement with the Garden City News?
We're taking comments.
Hmm?
We're taking comments.
You can't answer that question?
We don't usually comment. We don't usually do comments.
Okay, I think when you write this up in the newspaper, you should mention the circulation of each newspaper. The Garden City Life has about 1/3 or 1/4 of the circulation of the Garden City News. So by definition, you're reducing the communication with the residents by making this change. And the last comment on that would be that you should also state, and you explain this to the residents, what are the things that Garden City News wasn't doing that Garden City Life might do for us? In other words, and what, as a corollary to that, what is that Garden City News, I forget it. That ends that, I just want to say something about another topic. There's a document in the hallway that has 5 whereases and 4 resolves. But has no title, no date, no nothing. Is that official? Was that meant to be distributed today?
Yeah, that's the resolution we're acting on. It's referenced as
But why isn't it have a
number 10.
Why doesn't it have a formal look to it? This is a statement by the Board of Trustees, the date, make it look official.
Well, we would when we published it, yes. This was just,
This
should have been stapled to the agenda.
But this is not published then?
No.
Okay. Okay, also on the St. Paul subject, I have been perplexed over the years, in recent months, as to the number of...
Is this an agenda item?
Well, it relates to St. Paul. I don't know if this document is part of the agenda or not. But, it's regarding St. Paul's.
That's later on. That we're gonna have a discussion later on. So it's not an agenda item, right? On number 10? How did you set this up?
Well, I guess this one is comment, it looks like an agenda.
It's intended to be part of the agenda, right? Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
I have not kept track of all the consultants and contractors that we've hired over the years and current contractors that are working for us. Wouldn't it be helpful to the residents if you published a list of all the contractors who are currently being paid to do work on St. Paul?
It's on the website. It's on the website.
Okay, I'd like to see it in a way that you give each one a name and how much we're paying them and what the responsibilities are.
Great something. Okay.
And do they communicate with each other? Is there any overlap between them? Are they each independent?
No, it's a team. It's a complete team. And Tuesday night, we're having a work session to talk to potential construction manager.
But I guess the theme of what I'm saying is that there's concern among the residents that we're spending a lot of money on consultants. And, you know, where is it getting us? And who are these people? When does their contract end? I think you owe that to the public.
All the information is available on the website. All the information.
All the information is on the
All
website.
that information that you're asking for is on the website.
But it
You
might
should
be
come
nice
down
to-
to the work
It
session.
might be nice to organize it this.
It's very organized, it's on the website. It's
Okay,
not-
thanks.
You don't have to search for it. It's right here.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Trustees. My name is Peter Dahl, 111 Tree Valley Avenue. I just want to echo the comments that Mr. Kelly, Mr. Salem made about changing the official designation of our newspaper from the Garden City News, Garden City Life, for the same reasons they mentioned before. It would seem to me you'd want the paper to get to the majority of the residents in Garden City, and you're not going to do that with the Garden City Life if you're changing the designation to them. So I don't want to comment any further. My opinion is that we should keep the official designation as the Garden City. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Good evening, Bob Morris, and I'd like to also speak a little about the memorandum we have here on the whereas, where is, where, it says here, it is the opinion of the board that there is no overwhelming public consensus on what to do with the building. Now, how do you come up with this?
with this idea. The only one that's
27
really
years
come out
of
with
non-action.
recently was the Western Property Association, who sent out a questionnaire recently and got a return on it. It wasn't a village-wide questionnaire.
Right.
If this is going to impact all our taxes and so on, we should be involved, not just you people making the decision. Apparently, according to this, we only have 3 paths. Do nothing, or make some sort of recreation community basis of it, or save it for historical preservation without regard to force and potential use. I mean, I don't think that's just, you can't narrow it down to just what you people want, or what your ideas are. It should be out there for all of us to make the consensus on. It may not show a overwhelming majority, but at least it will give people the feeling that they have some, they have a dog in the race.
Mr. Orzo, if I can address this, I've lived here since '95. I've been involved in St. Paul's committee when they had the original 16. I was involved with that, and Mr. Noran ran the committee with 4 members for every single BOA. I was involved in the mailing that went out questionnaire to the entire village.
Yeah, that was back in 13.
Exactly. And bottom line is, since '95, I have never seen, ever, a consensus of this community of anything to do. The reality of it is that you're sitting there looking at a building that's basically almost 27 years old, 26, 27 years old. It's deteriorating, and you're right now at a point where you basically have 3 choices. Choice number 1 is you do nothing. Choice number 2 is you restore it historically. Choice number 3, you develop into something else. And the reality of it is, there's no other choices. No one's coming in to save it. Adelphi's not coming in to do this. No one's going to come in and buy it. All of those dreams, none of that ever had reality since 1995. So what we're doing is that we are spending time, we are spending money, but what we want to do is we want to get a realistic evaluation of what we have and how we're going to move forward. And that's what we're doing.
What do we,
Hold on, but I think there's a misunderstanding of what this is. We're trying to get information out. So this is just a piece of info. Here's our current thoughts. Here's what we're moving towards. There's no decision in this.
I realize that, but it almost looks like an edict from the board that we're gonna make our decision, and not based upon what the public wants.
Again, I think what Trustee Bolduc is saying, and as every past survey, poll has shown you, there is no consensus as to what to do, and somebody's got to make a decision. And we're getting more input. We hired consultants. We have another consultant who's going to come into the village and talk to the rec commission, talk to the sports groups, talk to the dance groups, talk to the performance groups, talk to people in the POAs, and we'll get more input. That's all.
When will this information come from the people with the drones running through the building?
When they complete their work.
You have any idea when?
I would assume within 6 months, 3 months, 4 months, somewhere in that span. The reality of it is, if you take a look at it, there's been a tremendous amount of discussion and no path and no direct result. And I'm proud to say that I've been on this board now for 6 years, and when I take a look at every single area it was, does it make a difference? How long did we talk about the senior center? It's finally resolved. How many times did we talk about the fields to the point to where the GCAA wouldn't even believe what we did? And look at what's been done there. We've done that in every single section of this village, and now we're finally addressing St. Paul's. So the reality of it is nothing's being rushed, nothing's being done without the public being knowledgeable. But what we're doing is we're going about this in a realistic way. If we want to find out what we have to do with the building, we have to have it professionally involved. Not someone who stands outside the building and says, geez, this is what I think it should be. So we're dealing with...
I'm just saying the timing. If you're saying that this report will not be available for 6 months, why did this come out?
We're trying to keep people advised and informed.
Sure.
We get criticized all the time when we don't put something out every week.
Just listen to the first comment we had. Where's the contracts? Where's this? It's only
Well, let me ask you, your first time out of this turf field, indoor turf field, if you would have read the report back in 13, only about 12% of the public were interested in any sort of turf field.
No, actually, the number one thing they wanted was an indoor swimming pool. So things change over time, it's evolving, and we're trying to
Yeah, but
service the
I'm
community.
saying that
Everyone's
only
here.
12% of that survey were even thinking about a turf field, but you were willing to
The
spend
turf-
$125,000
the turf-
on
the turf-
producing
the turf-
a turf field.
Mr. Holden, let me just say this. Whatever it is, it doesn't make a difference if it's a turf field or not. It doesn't make a difference if it's a hockey ring or not. That doesn't matter. What matters is that you either leave it as it is, you restore it historically, or you develop the building into something. Whatever that something is in the building, that part is going to probably change or not change. That I don't know. But all I know is that we're not locked into any particular thing.
I agree with that, but stop using taxpayers' money on these follies. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, that's your opinion, you're entitled to that opinion, thank you. Whoever wants to come on up.
I'm close. My legs are weak. All right, my name is, can you hear me?
Yes.
I have a hearing problem, so I never know how loud I speak. My wife yells at me. All right, I want to talk a little bit and pick up on what has been said about the Garden City News, all right?
Tom, can you just give us your name?
Thomas Medbury, 57 First Street.
Okay,
I
thank you.
remember that. Okay, sorry about that. I
That's okay.
just got into it. But for those who know or don't know, the Garden City News has been the official newspaper of Garden City for at least 50 years. Peter would probably acknowledge that. I worked for this village then. 50 years. I was surprised to see this. I was even more surprised to see this in January, considering that the Garden City News was appointed as the official newspaper of Garden City at the organizing meeting in April, as it has been done for the last previous 50 years. And we're 2.5 months away from April, where the organizing meeting takes place, and we will have a new mayor, he or she or whatever, who will have the right, the power to appoint the official newspaper.
You did hear the change that we made, that the bottom line is this is not being changed as of tonight. What happens is both papers will receive all the information, and then what happens is on April 8th, it's our intention then to then make a change. So between now and April 8th, which would be the annual period, which is exactly your point.
And that's up to the board, as you well know.
So let me just, you just changed that tonight, okay? When I came here and I read the agenda, it says effective.
But you
So
were
that's
here
what
when
we told you. I got that.
it was
Okay,
amended.
all right, I'm just trying to put things in context. Sure. All right, so you've amended it and you moved it to the end, but still, it's kind of shocking that you would even think to put it on the calendar in the middle of 9.5 months, which may lead me to a suspicion, only a suspicion, or a hypothesis that maybe legally, when that appointment was occurred, as a designee of the official newspaper, that appointment had to continue until April.
Mr. Lindbergh, I respect you, you're gonna waste your 4 minutes on something that doesn't,
Okay,
that
let's
doesn't
move
pertain
on.
anymore.
Let's move on to a critical point. It says legal notices. Now, the Garden City News carries multiple information about the village activities. We have mayor's column, we have the library, we have all those ancillaries, departments and services that people pick up the newspaper and read it. Is that changing? Will that not be in the Garden City News going forward?
Probably not.
I'm sorry?
Probably not.
Yes.
Probably not. We'll have to
Okay,
decide.
all right, now, let me ask you this.
When I joined the board, we actually used both papers all the time.
Please, I'm just.
I believe when you were on the board,
I'm
they
on the
did too.
agenda item, that's all, I just want to Garden City.
I understand.
Okay, so, all right, don't subtract my time, I'm just, want to stay focused. So now, from this night, going forward to April, will the Garden City News carry the information
Yes.
that it previously
Yes,
carried?
yes.
So all the people, everybody can walk out of here tonight
Yes.
and not realize that next Friday or the Friday after, we're gonna pick up the paper
Yes.
and not see that.
Yes.
So, all right, so now you're gonna carry it, all right, for an interim period. But as of
April
the
8th.
well, if it is not otherwise changed by the successive mayor,
And the board.
and What?
And the board.
Well, and the board, yeah, but I mean,
Don't poo-poo, there's a board.
No, please, don't disrespect them, but it's a mayor's appointment, and the board has then the opportunity to change the mayor's appointment. I know what the vote is, Peter, but you know better than I, you were the mayor at the time. So, all right, so from now to the next organizing meeting, residents of this village will be able to pick up the paper, and it'll be the same as it was before.
No change.
But come that date, based on this, unless if it's followed by the board or otherwise, that means the Garden City News is out. Correct?
Correct.
Now, going to the point that these gentlemen have made, you don't want to answer the question. Okay, I got that. But the reality is people are thinking about what the answer is. What shocking thing did the Garden City News do to warrant this change starting at this board meeting, and now you postponed it to April? There's something that's gone on that doesn't seem to meet the eye. We've been doing this for 50 years. It was I don't know, did they fail to publish a legal notice on time? Did they do something that made a legal obligation against you? What is it? I mean, nobody knows. It's shocking, but all right, it's just, thank you for.
Running out of time.
I got that. Thank you for completing or allowing the Garden City News to function for the next 2 months, because frankly, you offered no notice to the public. It was just simply on the agenda that it was over, and I think the public, frankly, should be very disappointed in you taking that action initially. And thank you, though, for not making it effective tonight. So we'll be able to revisit this between now and then. And it would be interesting to hear from the candidates that are running, I don't know who the new ones are or not, whether they want to continue the Garden City News to serve this village as it has so faithfully served it. It's almost like, where do I go get my news? Grab the Garden City News.
About 10 seconds.
Thank you, I got 10 seconds.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Let me get out. The old men.
Kathleen Noro, 4 Maryland Avenue. I hate to stand up here and beat a dead horse. I used to have subscriptions to both the Life and the News. And the reason I got rid of my subscription to the Life is that a good portion of the information in the Life I could read in Newsday, but a few days beforehand. And my concern now is if we are switching to the Life, or the possibility of going to the Life, is that going to continue, that it's not going to be strictly a Garden City newspaper? Are we still going to read a lot of information about the town of North Hempstead, the town of Oyster Bay? I can get all this in Newsday and get it more promptly. So I would like to ask you perhaps to reconsider your decision, or the possibility of your decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Mayor, trustees, good evening. Nick Episcopia, 77 South Park Avenue, Rockville Center, formerly 38 Clayton Road, Garden City. I have been asked this evening.
You can just hold it, Nick. Hold it, Nick.
Hold it? Okay. I've been asked this evening to read a letter to the editor of the Garden City News and the Garden City Life. This letter has been endorsed by the following people who have served our village somewhere between 90 and 100 years. Donald Brody, former mayor; Maureen Clancy, former trustee; Brian Devaney, former mayor; Nicholas Episcopia, former mayor; Peter Gall, former mayor; Thomas Lamberti, former trustee; Gerard Lundquist, former mayor; excuse me, Alan Mathers, former mayor; Frank Couches, former mayor; John Watrous, former mayor. We are neither proponents nor opponents of the village board's proposal to convert St. Paul's to some sort of recreation center. As former mayors and trustees of Garden City, we are, however, advocates for the voice of the people. especially in light of the enormous cost of the project that is anticipated to be somewhere in the vicinity of $60 to $80 million, with no clear projection for the ongoing operational expenses thereafter. In July, at a public presentation of the proposed concept for St. Paul's, Mayor Dorney was asked if there will be a referendum so that the residents can vote on the bond issue needed to complete this project. He clearly said no. Residents have asked the same question at village board meetings, and the trustees' silence on the subject, except for trustee Bolerbrook, who appears to support a referendum, leads us to believe that they agree with the mayor's decision not to have a referendum so that the board can go ahead and make the decision on their own, which they can do. Residents and the undersigned on this letter are asking the board's commitment to hold a referendum when the plans are finished and the project's cost has been determined. The question is fair and deserves an answer. The Garden City taxpayers own St. Paul's, and the Garden City taxpayers are financially responsible for the enormous cost of the project. In light of the recent vote by the mayor and trustees to spend up to $400,000 for the plans, on top of approximately $100,000 already spent, it appears that they are serious about going forward with converting St. Paul's into some form of recreation center. Therefore, we firmly believe that before the village board decides on its own to fund any plan for a recreation center at St. Paul's without the taxpayers' express permission, the residents of Garden City have the right to and deserve a referendum on the bond issue that will fund this project. This expenditure is estimated to be millions more than the entire village budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Leo Stimler, 67 Huntington Road. I agree with Mr. Kelly, Mr. Salem, Mayor Gall, Kathy Oro, regarding the Garden City News and the Garden City Life. I'm disappointed that you, the trustees, that you have not explained why you're switching. With many of these items on this agenda, you explain why you do something. For example, the attorney, I'm sorry, Peter B. explained that the formal agenda item A1 is a protective measure. You explained why. And for many other things here, you explain why you do something. You didn't explain why you are switching from the Garden City News to the Garden City Life, and I'm really flabbergasted that you're considering this. I do get a subscription to both newspapers, and I'm really disappointed in the Garden City Life. If you look at it from last spring and summer, there were more articles about Stewart Manor than there were about Garden City. There are also a lot of mistakes in the Garden City Life, I'm sorry to say. I mean, they had a picture last year of the Nassau County legislator, Laura Schaefer. They called her a New York State Assemblyman. You say, well, we all make mistakes. This was on the front page of the paper. Also, as Trustee Lamberti said, it's important it has a much lower circulation, so fewer people are going to get information, and that concerns me. Look at the letters to the editor. There are more letters to the editor in the Garden City News in 1 month than there are in the Garden City Life in an entire year. Since you won't tell us why, this leads many of us to speculate why. And I'm wondering why, if the reason might be that in November or December, the editor of the Garden City News said there should be a poll of residents about the expenses at St. Paul. And I'm wondering, frankly, if you're having a temper tantrum. Since the editor is saying this, then okay, then we'll take our business elsewhere. I hope that's not the reason, but I'm very disappointed in your change of newspapers.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, sir.
Brian Panola, Queensberry Road. Good evening, Mayor Dorney and fellow trustees. As Trustee Bollebrook mentioned earlier about St. Paul's, one of the alternatives is to develop it. So I figured this would be an appropriate time to tell you my plan for St. Paul's. But I'm going to ask the board a quick question. Who are the two largest institutions in our community today? You can answer. All right, I'll answer for you. Adelphi University and NYU Winthrop. Now we know Adelphi University is growing. They are situated on a constrained site and they have no place to grow. If we went to Adelphi and offered them a whole floor, I'm speaking just in general terms, 50,000 square feet, and explain to them that they can remove all of the offices that are currently used for administrative purposes on the campus, revert them back to academic uses, they would jump at the opportunity. If we spoke to Winthrop NYU, who, as you notice, almost every other month is taking additional space and coming further south down Franklin Avenue, explain to them the merits of taking the additional space and how it will help this project, they would jump on that opportunity. They just made an announcement that they're committing to 250,000 square feet over at the Hub project. And St. Paul's is certainly a lot closer. If they need to take 50,000 feet, they would do that in a minute. And then we would retain the ground floor for our village's use. Community uses, including some of the proposed recreational, athletic uses you're proposing, keeping the chapel for various type of entertainment uses, etc. It's viable. It could work. It could work. Secondly, pertaining to the resolution that you would like to adopt this evening, I would propose that you consider amending paragraph 6, which starts off with unanimously resolved. If you go to the sentence where it says, and includes preservation of significant portions of the exterior and interior for historic and architectural purposes, I would suggest that you add, and maintain St. Paul's status on the National Register of Historic Places, and also be a U.S. Green Building Council LEED certified project. That's something we haven't heard too much about, and that's something I'd like to see you add. Our village has a tremendous opportunity to create an award-winning, state-of-the-art adaptive use project. As you've heard me say in the past, let's not devolve into, in quotes, any town USA. Let's continue our tradition of being one of the most admired villages in the state of New York. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Hello, my name is Terry Kenny from 10 Bayberry. One of the things I wanted to discuss was my understanding is that kids or people are getting into St. Paul's School, and I'm worried that they could start a fire. There's no alarm system there. My understanding was that there was an alarm system, and I think that the alarm system should be operated again. The other thing that I was going to talk about was I spoke to an architect at Firehouse Bell, and my understanding was that the first plan for St. Paul's was to place a new recreation center behind St. Paul's and to rehabilitate the St. Paul's School and have a separate new recreation center behind St. Paul's. And I just wanted to know why that plan wasn't considered. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Good evening. Arlene Genesi, 67 Hilton Avenue. Since Deputy Mayor Trevay informed us that there were vandals, this was at a December 10th CPOA meeting. None of us were aware that it was broken into and that there was damage done. And Meg Norris also published the pictures of the filmmakers who went into the building unauthorized and filmed for at least 15, 20 minutes. And my what has been done by the trustees to secure the building and to protect the priceless Tiffany window that is in St. Paul's? Has anything been done? I was under the impression, when you said that you were going to spend $400,000, that there was going to be something done to the building to make it at least safe, that it wouldn't be broken into whatever. And I was wondering, I guess you don't have to answer.
Tuesday night, we're having a work session to meet with 3 construction management firms, and their initial stage is that help us figure out what needs to be done.
Well, if we can address the safety aspect of it, Commissioner Jackson, could you address what happened at St. Paul's and what we've done to secure it?
Yeah, we have increased patrols, so we're trying to get extra lighting, and Kevin's staff is helping us secure the windows. We are investigating that incident. It's an active investigation.
So
How did they get into the building?
Investigating.
Well, we're investigating that. There's a couple of possibilities of them getting in. We don't have that information at this time. We did find a lower window open, and we also found a door that was unlocked. And we're taking all those into consideration.
Apparently it was very easy for anyone to get into that building without having to break in. They got in very easily. And I was under the impression that it was the responsibility of the Board of Trustees to take care of that building. That belongs to the village, belongs to all of you. What are you doing today? This happened December 10th, when you announced, Deputy Mayor, that there was a break-in and vandals were there. What has been done physically, not another study, not another work session, which is great that you're having a work session. I'll be there. But that window is priceless. Is it insured at least?
No, I don't know what insurance says.
I don't know. I guess nobody knows anything.
To be fair, the idea is that there's a lot of talk like, oh, you guys are doing studies, and someone called them follies. This is a very complex problem. This building is not an easy thing. Brian can't show up with a bucket of Pine Sol and clean it, and everyone be happy. There's a lot more to do there, right?
Yeah.
So the idea is that there are 2 separate issues. Obviously, patrols and things like that, keeping people out is primary. Locking the door, shutting the windows, obviously.
That should have been done a long time ago.
Obviously. But
we can't get someone to go in the building and fix the windows. They won't go in.
And
we have to clean it first.
Hazmat people will go into that
Okay,
building.
I guess you're an expert.
No, I'm not.
Okay,
I don't know
then.
that.
We are talking experts.
Just to address that.
Not involved into a bad conversation, even to get people to do the right work takes some time. That's what the work session is about. And I think at that same CPOA meeting, we talked about how we should get these guys to go in there and take out of the building the things that we think are really, really non-replaceable, like the window, like some of the work items that we want to keep, and put them into storage or somewhere for safekeeping while the building is abated. All I'm telling you is that doesn't happen overnight. You have a couple architects sitting in that next to you right there. They'll
I've been on this planet
right.
a long
So
time.
so the point is, we're working, you asked me what's being done, I'm telling you. So Tuesday, we had a first round of interviews of construction managers. We narrowed that list down.
What are construction managers? I don't understand that.
So these are the people that will hire the hazmat people to go in and start abating the harmful materials from the building, getting it to a state where we can make the necessary repairs that we talked about on the roof, on the windows, and all
So
those
are they
things.
the people that come from the company that you've hired for $400,000?
That's, we haven't hired
I don't
someone for the
understand.
$400,000. These are the construction managers.
And
They're not to be
who do
confused
they
with.
work for?
They would work for us.
So there's a number of them that
It'd
you're
be a separate
hiring.
hire.
Right now, there's 3 candidates.
There's 3 candidates who we are talking to Tuesday night in a work session, and we will hire one of them.
So,
Oh,
right,
right,
so
okay.
there are 3 candidates that come, and they'll present kind of different projects they've done that are like this or similar in scope, and then we'll collectively choose one or think which one can do the best job for the right price. And then they will be the people who subcontract this sort of work and coordinate this work to be done. So we want it to happen, believe me, as soon as possible, and we're going as literally as fast as we can. The other things are inexcusable. I'm not talking about how someone got in, if there was a window or a door left open, that's not great, obviously. You asked me what we were doing for the project, and I'm trying to answer you in the best way that I can so that people can understand what we're doing.
And just to let you know, the reason that we are going this route is because we went to hire 3 companies to go in there and to deal with the windows, and they refused to go into the building. So, what ends up happening is that you're in a situation to where you have to find professionals who will go in there with a plan and with the knowledge of what they're dealing with.
Okay.
So just, like I said, this is not just like you're sitting there saying, oh, let's just go in there and fix this, I've heard that. No, I'm not saying that you are, I meant when I said you, I just meant you in general.
What we're doing,
Right,
because
sure.
that window is priceless.
I understand.
Even if we got it out of there and donated it to a museum,
We're not going to donate,
it's
we're going
going
to use
to
it.
be wrecked.
We want it.
It is not protected.
I know.
It is not insured.
So that is the reason why we need to go in
At least
Get it.
insure it.
and make it safe. We have to.
It's like it's been going on forever and ever.
I know, a lot of
Just
those
keep saying
former
tomorrow,
trustees and mayors are right
tomorrow,
next to you. If you want, you probably have a better shot at blaming them than me for that. But, we're
I
doing
don't want to
everything we
blame
can.
anyone. I want to move forward.
That's where we're going.
That's what we're trying to do.
Tuesday, I
That's
know
what
you
we're
come
trying
home
to
with
do.
stuff, so.
Let
Show
me
up
say
on
this.
Tuesday and we'll do it.
Let me say this, I do recall at the end of that meeting, that board meeting, or the presentation from the people from Triple B, Carlos Cardoso said, I think one of the trustees asked him, how quickly can we get going on this because the winter and snow and rain are coming at us. And he said that he acted as if he was like, he didn't think too much was possible, it would take time, but there was a woman with him, I think she was his assistant, and she stood up and stood next to him, and she said that they would try to do their best on that. And I think that in all the exposure I've had to them, they are decent people and that they will do it. It's just that we have to narrow it down to that construction manager, and then maybe they could get going. So I would have some hope. I really would.
Is there anything?
They are aware of the fact that we're concerned about protecting the building during the period when they can actually get their work up and off the ground.
Yeah, and the building it's fine. It's not going to fall down tomorrow. But
That's
that
true.
Tiffany window is very vulnerable, and that should be protected. And the building should be secured so that no one gets hurt and it doesn't go on fire or anything like that. I mean, to have people going in and out of the building, and yet the trustees are saying no one can go in there, no one wants to go in there. Those
If someone breaks
filmmakers got in
it,
there.
if someone breaks into the building, we were aware of it, we addressed this. The reality of it is that we have a 120,000 square foot building. So the reality of it is that these people who went in there did damage, broke in.
Oh, they did damage in the building? I didn't know that.
Whatever, okay, look, it just, again, I'm not gonna get into a semantics thing about this. I'm just saying to you, listen, we understand they went in, and I'm glad that no one got hurt, and we agree with your aspect of securing the building.
Actually, just let me say one more thing. We are focused on it, and just to give you an example of attempts that lean toward securing the building, the 2 people who did the graffiti on the building were apprehended. Within the commission, I got that done within about 2 days. And no, they were 2 men, 20 years of age each, and they, I think, received class 4 felonies. Now, when that gets around among the graffiti folk, that if you go near that building, they will arrest you, they will apprehend you, and so forth. All right, so it's not that we've done absolutely nothing. Do we feel frustration also? Yes. But
And can you do more? I hope.
Thank you
very much.
Hey, Brian.
Build a wall, by the way.
Excuse me?
Build a wall.
It's a fence or a wall? Anyone else? Yeah, well, anybody else with any other agenda items this is supposed to be? Okay.
Brian Panola, 56 Kingsbury Road. Mr. Mayor and trustees, I just want to set the record straight. As of my last regular field visit to St. Paul's, which was exactly 1 week ago this evening, unless anything has been done since then, I can show you exactly where the people enter the building. If you recall, last April, I submitted to each trustee an 8-page photographic report of the windows on the ground floor and openings, including a picture of me in my suit, showing how quickly I can get into the building. So, again, those repairs that I'm referring to can be made from the exterior. I'm sure any one of your personnel would be willing to do it from the exterior. I also offered to do it myself and sign waivers to secure the building. As a result of your non-action, as you've heard, twice people have been inside the building. We run the risk of one of those people perhaps being a smoker and inadvertently dropping a cigarette and then the building going up in flames. Again, I'll offer my services. I'll be there this Saturday. I'll be glad to do it, or have one of your personnel do it. We're not talking a big job. And again, if nothing was done since last Thursday, that situation still exists. I'm reluctant to speak publicly on what those areas are because I don't want anybody else to realize how easy it is to get into the building. I urge you to please do it, or call me, and I'll do it myself. You're welcome.
Any other agenda items? Okay, I guess we'll do the new business first. Or the
new business, yes. First item is, Mayor, is there a motion to set the date of February 13th?
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed approving the minutes from December 6th, sorry about that. I get a motion to approve the minutes from our meeting of December 6th. Trustee Goldberg makes that motion, seconded by Trustee Menudo. All those in favor? Unanimously approved, thank you very much. Now we'll go to the description of the items on our formal agenda.
Yes, sir. I believe I described the local law before in connection with the property tax levy, and at this time it would be appropriate for a motion to set the date of February 13th for a public hearing in connection with the proposed local law to authorize the village to adopt the property tax levy in excess of the limit established in General Municipal Law, Section 3C, so as to permit the village to override the state imposed property tax levy cap for the fiscal year commencing June 1, 2019. Moved by the mayor, seconded by
Trustee Delaney.
Trustee Delaney. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing no discussion on the motion, all those in favor signify by saying aye. The ayes have it unanimously. At this time, then, there is now a public hearing scheduled for February 13th on that proposed local law. Is there a motion to set a hearing date of February 13th on a proposed local law to amend the village code in relation to street openings, clarifying the application of same and adding provisions to limit reopenings and repavings in less than 3 years? Moved by Trustee Heyer, seconded by Trustee Menudo. Any discussion on that motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Unanimously. Mayor, at this time it would be appropriate to address the date for an annual tax sale, and that date has been suggested as March 29th, 2019. Is there a motion to set that date? Moved by Trustee Delaney, seconded by Trustee Heyer. Any discussion on that motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Unanimous.
The ayes have it unanimously. And a final public hearing for the tentative budget for fiscal year 2019-2020. The suggestion is to set that public hearing for April 8, 2019, which is also the organizational meeting. There's a motion to that effect, moved by Trustee Foley, seconded by Trustee Heyer. Any discussion on that motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. The ayes have it unanimously. And that brings us to the consent calendar, Your Honor.
Okay. So I guess we need a motion to approve the items on the consent calendar. I think we amended number 12.
And also number 16B.
To reflect 21,000.
21,500.
Motion to approve the consent calendar. Trustee Menudo makes that motion. Seconded by Deputy Mayor Trouvé. All those in favor? Unanimously approved. Thank you very much.
Although on the agenda but not on the consent calendar is since the comments on non-agenda items, the resolution regarding St. Paul's, and the work session regarding the parking lot.
Great. So the resolution should then was moved up.
Yeah, it's a mistake, but now we're gonna move to the work session.
So the resolution regarding St. Paul has already been passed as part of the consent.
Yeah, that should have been before, should have been the 32.
You didn't think about it, well,
We do want to part of the consent calendar.
we don't have part of consent calendar with description.
As amended.
As amended.
Well, certainly it's still sending a message.
Thank you.
Very good.
We'll now move to our, I guess, citizens' comments on other items that we haven't previously discussed. And the work session will come next. Anybody have any general items they're interested in commenting on? Yes, sir.
Just wanted to take this moment to thank Commissioner Ocker for your work and just how wonderful it is to be a part of your life, because you really look out for people and you do a wonderful job, and we will miss you terribly, especially in the community of disabled people. We look for you, and you've done great things for us. We appreciate that. You know, we just passed something where you guys had a lot of comments from the people.
But
And
this is not the time for.
No, it's
we've
not,
already talked
I want to say that
We've already talked about it.
says, yeah, well, it's not over,
Okay.
And that should have been discussed at the POA meeting. But anyway, that's all. Thank you so much, Mr. Ocker, and thank you guys, and I'll get to know you soon. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
There's just a couple of things I forgot to mention. I do want to thank you all for your service to the village. That's one thing I did want to mention. I know you guys all spend a lot of time, and you do a great job for the residents here.
You can just remind us of your name, sorry.
Oh, Terry Kenny, 10 Bayberry.
Thank you.
I do think that we should use both newspapers. I just think that would make most sense. It's been done in the past. In addition to that, I think we definitely should have a survey of the residents for, if there is going to be a new rec center, that the residents be surveyed. There may be more people may want a pool, more people may want basketball courts or walking jogging track over a hockey rink. That's something many people might have if there is a new rec center. So that was basically it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
It does have a jogging track in it, by the way, the concept.
Oh, okay, that's good.
And the concept is not only recreation, including cultural recreation as well, so I think we're all forgetting that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I guess we'll work to a work session on modifying 7N, figuring out what we can do, and we wouldn't be actually doing it tonight, but we would be setting it up so we can, I believe we'd have to do some local code changes if we were to set up something, in terms of permits or payments or.
The village board is authorized to regulate parking, including the issuance of parking permits to residents or whatever subcategory they choose to do in municipal parking lots. So the board has a wide range of options that may entail sending
The village is empowered by state law to regulate its own municipal parking lots. And that includes the power to issue resident permit parking or to otherwise segregate the lot into reasonable and rational categories. So you have a wide range of options, however, they would then ultimately need to be embodied in the code in some form.
So we've been having discussions for quite a while, how to figure out not just this parking lot, but generally dealing with commercial versus residential, other uses. We've focused on this lot at the moment. So we've been talking about creating a kind of segregated area that we would set up for permitted parking, much like we do at train stations with a fee. Segregate that for residents of surrounding apartments. And then kind of redesignate areas hopefully closer to commercial stores and things, because that needs more of a sort of flow of in and out. So that's generally the topic. I guess we have a visual that will help us. Hopefully.
High school wall. Please.
When's the new laptop coming in?
Yeah.
Like tomorrow? Those guys are out.
They have their own.
That's the seven end markings.
Do we have like a color-coded diagram of what the hours and the permitted parking?
Yes, really.
We're just working on. My bad. Does it say though, like, what's 8 to 8 or what's 8 to 6? Oh, you can read that? Who can read the ledger? I'll give you $5 Commission cheated. Let them. So all the spaces in red are what?
Okay, there's 130 of yellow, that's 2 hour, 13 of a blue color, which is 13, 117 of I'm not a good color guy, purplish, purple, that's 117, and...
Morning sunrise, get it right.
Thank you, morning sunrise, thank you very much. My favorite colors are pink and white, those are color tickets.
Bless you, Kenny. Bless you.
Thank you, sir. And 265 8-hour parking, that's in red. I think it's red.
So what's circled are 63 spots up the side here, I guess closest to the building.
Can you have a pointer?
And then along this row.
Yeah.
We're only talking I know we were only talking about putting 20 spots in.
No color on this.
I can point one.
Yeah, please point, just tell us what this means.
We should have one of the ideas is if the permits were allowed, we would look at these spots here and these here, because we don't know how many people will ask for permits. So what's good about these areas, they're adjacent to the buildings, the less people walking through the lots because we live in these buildings. And also, it's dirt, it's easy to put signs moving back and forth. If only 43 people ask for a permit and the board chooses to do 40 permits, then we can move the signs. However, if we need to go further or move them a little bit, there's sections of 8 and 18 with poles and dirt that we have in here. Or we can do it 8 at a time or 8 and 18 at a time in every row. So if we need to add or if we need to move. But these was one way we thought that we start with the 63 or whatever the board decides. But these are very easy to manipulate. You can shorten them, you can add them, and then we'll go into these areas. And these are closer to the buildings. This building, of course, has no.
So how many apartments are in Hilton's, the big building on the left,
Yes, I'm
right?
sorry, I gotta go through my here.
104.
I have all, you would be all.
Well, let me ask you a question. Where you have the 20 mark and the 43 mark, how many apartments are in those that attach to that?
Okay.
Hilton's 104.
Right?
99 7th Street is 22, 105 7th Street is 10, and 111 has 54.
Right, so where the 43 is on the bottom is this, Kenny, look at me. On the 43 here, where these apartments are, don't they have their own parking?
Some of them do.
Some do and some don't.
Right.
Okay, all right, so, and again, you and I work together on the medical building, so we we understand. It took us 2 years to get to the right situation, okay? So, my point is that we're talking about 63 spots. When we were originally talking about this, we were talking about potentially doing 20, maybe 25.
No.
I never knew where we were talking about 63.
You know where we were hooked up 20 was, we always talked about this below.
Yes.
But it was to provide more spots than that. I think Ken's just saying these are the easiest signs.
Yeah, I'm not recommending 63 this time, I'm recommending that, depending on the amount of permits you have, that will be a good area to work with, because it's much easier to move the poles.
No, listen, I think the location is 100% the right way to go, because this takes the cars away from all the other places that people park. So, again, my thing would be, I have no idea what the interest of the residents is going to be. And I think that's why we kind of have to take it step by step.
Yeah, for sure. These are two good zones.
I mean, this is the
And
perfect
it
place.
seems scalable out
Yes.
to here if we need more than 60.
Yeah,
Yes, the way that the ground and the poles we have, it's sections of 8 and sections of 18.
Right.
Or you could just do again, this is for residential parking, you could do go on Stewart.
Yes.
And that's where I would go, but I would just simply start with these
Right.
eight ones here.
So then what happens to the Ken, and what happens to the rest of the magenta?
Well, we might have to readjust where the 8 hours will be
Because we do still want to discourage the commuters.
Right.
So this will make it a little, if you get this, it will be easier to enforce.
These ladies show up to every meeting and they don't have this.
Right, I have it at home, but I didn't know we were having it.
So this is what we're talking
This will make it easier to enforce because
about. And then we're saying
the problem with enforcing the 8 hour now, there's a lot of residents in that 8 hour zone. This gives them an opportunity to move away from that zone, and then we will be enforcing the commuters and other violators.
Yeah, but again, I think sorry, if we get back up, so we have 104 apartments in Hilton. Excuse me. Kenny, we have 104 apartments in Hilton. Hilton Hall. Okay, and then along the southern border of this parking lot, there are 3 buildings there?
Yes.
Okay, so what are those?
99 has 22 apartments, there's 22 underground private spaces.
So they have some parking on their own, okay?
And they also have 10 outside spaces for staff and visitors.
So they have, wait, 32 they have 32 spaces for 22 apartments.
Yes, I believe that we were told 10 outside spaces for staff and visitors.
Well, that's their decision, that's not our problem. Okay. The next building?
105 7th Street, 10 apartments with 10 private garage spaces and 10 outside.
Those 10 outside are not in Garden City lot?
No.
No, it's in the other one.
Okay. So they have 20 spots for 10 apartments. And the third building?
111 7th Street has 54 apartments, they have 22 underground, and it's tough to determine. They have anywhere from 10 to 15 private spaces, there's no line, so it's difficult. To be in that 10 to 15 rounds, it'd be everybody walking a certain way.
Yes.
Some people may or may not take advantage of this, some may not.
Yes. There's no way,
I mean, I think first dibs, lack of a better way to say it, would be offered first to the apartments that don't have any available on-site parking.
Well, the only, I mean, to me, the only people who should be allowed to apply for that would be the people who live there.
Otherwise, we're subsidizing, we may be charging less than their parking.
Correct. So people, $500 per spot?
Right. That's why we're not offering it to them.
I'm hoping that we're going to be charging. I'm hoping that we're going to be charging a commensurate amount of money for these parking spots.
All ground or enclosed spot, believe me, you're not giving that up.
I mean, let me go back and say again, I hope that we're gonna be charging. Hold on, please, stop. I would hope that we're gonna charge a commensurate amount for these spots. I mean, we're not, I hope, hopefully, it's gonna be, you know.
Well, can I make a suggestion if I can? We have 63 possible spots. We have no idea what the response would be. So why don't we pick the 20 spots that are closest to the apartment that doesn't have parking? Start there and sit there and say, okay, let's open those 20 spots to a permit. We find out we even have 20 people who live in this 104 apartments if they want to have a permanent spot next to the building. If the 20 spots go like they do it along on the railroad in about 8 minutes, then we say, okay, now we have to look, maybe we have to add another 20 along that 43 route. But again, to open up 63 spots doesn't make any sense. You're better off starting with 20 and pick it next to the road, next to the apartment, where they don't have any parking whatsoever. See what happens with those 20, and then we have a discussion 3 months from now or whatever, see what the response is. I mean, that's the way, the most common sense way to do it.
20 seems like a small number for 100 apartments. Every other apartment building has 10 more spaces.
Well, okay, so what I'm just saying to you, so if we make it 63, okay, and 15 people go for it.
Well, then we don't have to change it.
Right.
Well, it's not going to say these are the areas.
But here's the difference. The reason that I say that is because if you designate 63 spots and you don't have demand, you're now taking away 63 parking spots for no reason.
Let me clarify. What we would say is, okay, people in Hilton, these are the 63 that are up for permit. What do you guys want to do? If you fill them up, fine. If you don't, or if you fill up 50 and those last 13 you throw back into the pool, it's, you know, it's no skin off our back. We're not going to change the signs until we're ready.
That's a rental?
Permanent anyway.
Is that a rental building?
Is it
What
all rental?
Yes, it's a rental building.
Do you guys have sort of periodic meetings or anything?
Nothing,
No.
we have nothing, we just, we're trying, you know, if you just get rid of the commuters.
You don't have to go door to door. All you have to do is
Yeah, get rid of the commuters that want to
I think this will go through them like wildfire.
Let me ask you a question, what happens if the demand is 100?
So that's what they're saying, so
Well,
here's the other thing.
yeah.
So here's the other thing. Let's look at it all possible scenarios. So we have designated permit parking. We all have, you know, this issue came up because of the commuter parking, right? They were
That's
different
right.
spots.
Yeah, fine,
Okay.
yeah.
So, you know, if someone's uncomfortable with the idea of any permit parking, then let's change the hours to eliminate the possibility of someone leaving their car all day. And maybe that makes this. What do you guys think?
I think so. That's it.
I mean,
Oh, wait. If you live in Hilton Hall, I can't park, I'm in my apartment, I'm not there, I'm not able to park for the day.
right, so there has to be some way that you can keep your eye
That's what
on.
we're trying to
No, no.
address.
Well, they've never been, the
Well, I
commuters
guess
have never been
again,
ticketed.
We need it at all.
I know I make this reference all the time, but again, I worked with Kenny on the lot of the medical place for 2 years. And
sounds
every
fun.
single thing we did, whenever you did one thing, sometimes it had unintended consequences. So although I agree with you that there are many other facets of this lot, as we will have other lots that we want to address, I will defer to Kenny, and please tell me if you think I'm wrong, is that I think the best thing to do is to first do this, see what the response is, see what the ramification is for the effect, and then you make an adjustment from there. Does that make sense?
Is that the only way?
Or if you want to do something different, you tell us.
No, I was just, to me, that was just the best areas to work off of, but again, you could start with a lower number and then expand, because signs you can just put in and move out.
What I'm saying is that even from, that's going to be at 5,000 feet, I'm up at 30,000 feet. Let's pull back up for a second. What the question is there a way where you can solve this problem without permits, or the permit allows you then to reduce the all-day parking everywhere else in the lot, except for these 63 spaces?
That's what we were talking
So
about.
that, no, I know, I'm just
Yeah, that's
getting
what
it
we're
out,
doing,
I'm just
right.
getting it out.
Right.
Yeah, as I said
Is that the
before,
only way that this can be, is this the only way to crack that egg of eliminating the computers, is identifying the residents with a permit slip?
That would help immensely, because again, with 8-hour parking, it's hard, we have all-day parking and permanent parking, but if the residents are moved in both areas, if you force the one area, everybody in that area has to be enforced, so you can't have selective enforcement. So that would give us a little easier, reason to be able to enforce 8-hour parking.
If you sell out all 63, you're taking 63 cars that will be there all day, away from what they have to enforce. What it does is it cleans up the lot.
Yeah.
And it moves the people who live there, whose cars are parked all through this lot,
Sure.
all the way towards the building. So it helps him with enforcement, and it helps everyone else who uses the lot to go to the grocery store, to go to Dunkin' Donuts, to go to everything else.
I mean, I think part of the problem is you need to figure out how many cars are there for the residents, right? Because if there's 100 cars there, now the other 40 that may have been parking in those areas by the apartments are now gonna go into those areas that you're trying to clear out.
But that's what I'm saying to you, that's what I'm saying to you. It's a
just
step-by-step
the
process.
same amount of cars.
You have to start somewhere. So you start somewhere and you say, okay, what is it?
And some, obviously, many apartment dwellers are moving their car, they're going to work, so I guess we're trying to cut down the commuter, which is
Yes.
4 hours or more, let's say.
Sure.
Other people who live there may go out, and you're not so worried about, they're not sitting there for 8 hours, so.
Would it make sense to first try to modify the hours in the area where people who don't live in Garden City are parking, just as a testing situation, and see how much that cleans up that area? If they can't park there long enough, they will go away. They can't use that space. Just to try it first, I was thinking.
The problem is
where do they put their cars?
Yeah, where the people who live in the apartment, where do they put their cars? I live in the apartment, I go to work.
I get it, okay, so then the apartment people who would be affected by that first thing, yeah, I get it, okay.
That's why we have to.
Why aren't they being affected?
Hold on.
Alicia Lavalio, Hilton Hall. I have had so many problems with the commuters. I go to work 9 to 2. When I come home at 2:15, I can't get a parking. I have to go down to Dunkin' Donuts and walk to Hilton Hall. That's not fair, that's my home.
You can get parking, it's just not where you want it.
Well, where, I mean, you know.
Would you want that's, I just want to be accurate, there is parking, it's just not where you want it.
See, but this, what she just said is the exact reason why I'm supporting this. Is because when she comes back at 2 o'clock and she's got nowhere to park because all the people commuting, now she parks her car all the way down by Dunkin' Donuts.
Right.
So from 2 o'clock until the next day when she goes out, her car takes a spot that all of us, when we want to go to the Chinese store and Dunkin' Donuts, we can't park there because her car is parked there.
You know what
But if she had a spot.
I wait until the train drops the people off at 6 or 7, and then I move my car because I take their space.
We're trying to avoid that, it's your problem, plus, like Trustee Bullock said, then it's also screwing up the
What else? They
stores.
become very aggressive, the commuters. I was backing out to go to work, and I guess I was too slow for him. He was waiting for my spot. He knocks on my window, almost gave me a heart attack. And he said to me, "Will you hurry up? I have to catch a train." I pulled right back in and turned my car off. She said, "Do you want your car key? What, are you crazy?" And I said, "No, you almost gave me a heart attack." But that's what we're contending with these people.
Absolutely.
No, right. If you think about the parking study that we saw a couple months back, they were saying that technically we have enough spaces. It was just that everyone's using them kind of in the least optimal way.
Exactly.
So while it seems like, oh, what is the real benefit here? The real benefit here is to put the resident cars on the perimeter closest to the residential buildings so that the rest of this lot really does get freed up for a whole bunch of work in itself. So
and for us to then attack the commuter part of it.
And then,
They're attacking us.
if you switch off the all-day parking, then the commuters are gone, and that moves actually everybody else in the village. So, I think this is a good start. I think, as far as how much to charge, I think we've quantified how much the parking spot.
Could you explain what?
I'll explain it to you. I pay, whatever it is, $150 or whatever for parking down on Railroad. I think that's how much it's going to be.
$150 for a long period of time, or $150 a month?
Are you trying to raise money?
No, I don't want to raise yours, but I sure don't want to see.
What's the fee for train stations? $150 a year?
A year.
Commissioner, do you have a list of fees? Do you have a list of the fees?
It's just, yes, Mayor, I have a list of fees. Basically, the railroad permit as stated is $150 per year. The 3 business lots that have permit parking, which will be Parkville 6, Medical Center, and Fair Court, is $200 a year. Permit parking for railroad non-residents is $400 a year, and Delphi pays $200 a year per space for National Boulevard.
It's the going rate. I think we've already established that residents pays $150 a year for.
200.
I pay $150 on my own subscription. If I get any perk for this job,
That's a Delphi. 200 is
$200 is for Parkville 6, Parkville 5, and Fair Court Parkville.
200. I'm sorry, my mistake.
My personal feeling is, I think it should be $250 a year. And I'm sorry, you're talking about a permit where someone is able to park their car 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year, 365 days, as opposed to someone who sits there and goes to the train Monday to Friday, and is there for 8 hours.
I agree.
So, Trustee Bowles, that's just my opinion.
You're saying in 6, it's already 200.
Okay, whatever. I mean, listen, I'll go with whatever. You want to make it 200, I don't care.
Well,
I'd rather be equitable and make it 200. Sorry,
I don't want to make it less than 200. And I agree.
I think that's an established cost.
I think 200 is a lot of money, isn't it? We pay a high rent there. That's how we
I pay a huge mortgage and a huge amount of money to live out there.
I've been for 48 years, so I know.
I believe the only fair way to do it is whatever the established fee right now, which happens to be $200. I think it's a fair way of saying $200 per year, whatever that works out to be, as long as it's, it's fair. I don't want to say it should be less for you guys or more for you guys. I think it should just
$16 a month.
That's what we.
$4 a week.
They all, my mind is killing us, they all went in a row. The parking lot is really a mess. We have leaves there that have been for I'm there almost 3 years. They're still there from when I first moved in. And there's mold underneath the leaves now. And the aides, they pull their blue gloves off and they throw them down. And so we have, really, it's around the perimeter. Bad news. I know it's hard to get to it because there's always cars parked there.
All right, well, we'll get on that, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Somehow we have to prove that all that in other words, the zones, we don't have
How many spots do we want
Yes, so first things first, right, we say these zones, which happens to be 63 spaces. If we get 40 responses, we lose one. If we get 30 responses, 13,
I don't agree, we should be offering parking spaces to the people who already have parking. They get it anyway.
Only to the apartments that don't have any parking.
Right.
It'll be like the most. I'm just
Has to work, so you just can't give out permits.
So we will have to figure out how we put out notice that we're thinking of doing this, we want to know how many people are interested in how many spots. I think most people at Hilton Hall use the internet, they don't use the Garden City.
That too. Internet, Garden City News.
So we will,
Yeah, we'll get the notice out. Okay.
let's figure it out.
Now, wait a minute, I have one other question. Irene, the permits, can we have separate permits made? Because you don't want to give these people the same permit that they would have to different color permit. So we have to have a different color permit. Whatever, I mean, however you want to do it, we have to have a different permit for this part as opposed to trainers. It's like a totally different color.
So our action plan is to get out notice, we're going to do this, we need an indication how many people are interested, and that'll help us decide whether we do 24 or 63 or whatever that number is. And then we will then move towards designating the areas, designing a sticker, charging the fee, doing the code thing, and put up the signs, so.
Is there any plan to change the 8-hour parking?
Once we,
I know you're saying that, but I think what you said is you're creating another situation. The commuters are the problem, and you're not, wait a minute, and you're not dealing with that. And the point is, wait, the big point is, I was told by one of the brown shirt people who work to ticket the car, you do not ticket the 8-hour parking.
Right, so right now.
So they park free.
Right now, okay, let me make this clear. Right now, we're not addressing that.
I know.
Right now.
It's obvious.
Right, so right now, we're going to address the spots with the permits. Once we do that, then we move to the next step.
Well, I do think that there are a lot of people that live in Hilton Hall that may not be able to afford $250.
And if they can't.
That's right. No, I mean, we're talking a lot of senior citizens.
First of all, it's only $200. Okay.
That's only to you $200. If you're living on a fixed income.
Ma'am, I understand.
Okay, I'm just giving you
Bottom line is,
a
it's a
little
choice.
information.
It's a choice. That's it.
It is a choice.
It
It
is
is
a
a
choice.
choice not to ticket the commuters too. Why do we do that?
No. The commuters, this is apples and yes.
No, it isn't.
Yes, it is.
That's what
Because
the
once we
problem
deal
is.
with this, then we'll deal with the commuters. You
No.
have to do it in a step by
Well,
step.
you're going it backwards.
Absolutely not.
You know,
Yes,
with
you are.
with all due respect, so the issue is, the only way to deal with the commuters is to remove the long-term parking. But if we did that without creating permanent spaces, we inadvertently ticket you all.
No, you wouldn't, because you have guns, you know exactly where we live.
we cannot do selective enforcement, that's not the. Sure you are, you're saying, don't write me a ticket because I live in Garden City in Hilton Hall, but I've been parked here 9 hours. But ticket that guy because he lives on First Street and he's been here 9
Well, I would
hours.
like to know why 8 hour, if they exceed 8 hours of parking, why they are not ticketed. And I was told
Your
the
neighbors and
shifts,
yourself would be ticketed if we did this.
no, it's because the shifts of the people who issue the tickets, they don't get in there early enough. These commuters come in at 5, 6, 7 o'clock. Their time is already on the clock as far as being in that 8 hours, and it really extends to 12 hours.
I've done this in years.
What is the
I was
shift of the
told-
parking gauge?
Well, I was told
Oh, hold on,
that
please.
they were told not
Excuse me,
to.
stop for a moment. Let the police commissioner.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
The market tires, we have the program where we market tires early in the morning, and then we come back in the afternoon. There are sometimes it's delayed coming back. However, we did do enforcement a while back, and we also we tried a warning program, and more than half of the warnings that we gave out were for residents. And they were gonna have more tickets than actually the people who possibly were using the railroad, or another thing people want to talk about are the workers in the area, they also park there. So, the problem was, from our 2 warning blitzes, We've been more residents probably getting tickets than people using a lot of other things. So that was a concern. We didn't want to burden the residents with that. And that's why I believe the board is trying to come up with a plan to help that.
To be fair, I mean, he runs the.
I know he does, and I have one more
Some anecdotally told me, oh, we don't do
question.
that.
I have one more question. Why do we have 8-hour parking in that parking lot? Do people go to Chico's for 8 hours?
Well, I think part of,
That's how much you're gonna park.
we're evaluating the hourly parking as part of this project, right?
Yes.
So, obviously, first we gotta address the permanent parking, right? Then we're gonna look at the overall time zone parking, and I agree, maybe the 8 hours doesn't make sense.
Is there an 8-hour parking in any other parking lot?
Every lot is different.
No, is there, but that's not the question. The
Yes.
question is, and which
Yes.
parking lot is that?
I'm not gonna get into all
Oh,
that.
I would really like to know, because I did take a ride through the village, and I don't think there is another 8-hour parking lot.
How about the big lot behind Rebel? Okay. Right, so, again, we're
Yeah, I
trying
don't think so, but if we know what the issue is, then maybe it could be resolved.
The next thing we also need to address is the overall enforcement, so I think,
Yes,
so,
yes, that's the
again,
problem.
we gotta work in lockstep, right? So first we'll do, then we'll deal with the size.
Well,
and there's a lot of lots that are not surrounded by apartments.
Exactly.
Well, but that's probably why they did 8 hours.
Well, you're guessing.
So are you.
No, I don't.
You've been there longer than I have. Maybe you're not. You
I've
should
been here
know.
a long, long time, and I've driven around. I might have missed something, but I don't think, what is the use of an 8-hour parking in that 7-10
It's a
parking?
mystery in life, we'll never know.
Mayor, are we
Oh,
done?
it's a mystery.
Okay.
Mayor, we now swear on this
end this
issue.
session, we're trying to get this.
Mayor, Mayor, are we now swear on this issue?
Yes.
Okay. I move we adjourn.
I believe we are going into an executive session to talk about a personnel matter.
Yes.